The Station Hotel in Ayr in southwest Scotland was at one time the largest and finest hotel in the town, catering to affluent Victorians during the golden era of steam. Its history is an interesting one, and in this video we will tell the story of how a once magnificent building that looked like this ended up looking like this. So come with us and take a step inside what was the Ayr Station Hotel. During the 19th century, the rapidly expanding railway network created opportunities, and one of these was the idea of railway tourism. Hotels were being built by railway companies all over Britain at the time, and one of the most famous in Scotland was the huge St Enoch Hotel in Glasgow, which opened in 1879. Seaside towns became popular destinations for railway tourists, and Ayr was the perfect place for some weary Glaswegians to retreat to for fresh air, trips to the beach, and of course to attend the horse racing. The chief engineer of the Glasgow and South Western Railway Company, Andrew Galloway, was tasked with designing and building a new railway station for Ayr, which incorporated a suitably large hotel. Construction started in 1883 on a site near to the existing Ayr Town head station, and a vast building was erected, made from locally quarried Ballochmyle red sandstone. When the completed hotel opened in 1886, it was very highly regarded, with the local press calling the French Renaissance style building a castle in Ayr and describing the luxurious interiors. The construction of the building is described as including iron beams and concrete for the principal floors, which would have provided a level of fire safety. The hotel could be accessed from the railway platforms at the back via a revolving door and also from the front. The station's ticket office and other facilities occupied most of the ground floor, and the ticket office was said to have featured a grand marble and mosaic interior. The hotel was said to be popular at the time, with the railway company offering package weekend trips to Glaswegians, which included the rail fare, bed, and board, all in the same package. The Station Hotel's success continued for the next few decades, and it would have been easy to have filled its 75 bedrooms regularly with the seasonal tourist trade and racegoers. With the nationalisation of the railways in the late 1940s, it briefly became a British Transport Commission hotel. However, it was soon sold off to private owners in 1951. In the 1960s, it was drastically modernised, with individual bathrooms being added to the bedrooms, and the original ground floor ticket office and kitchens being transformed into a new function hall called the Kintyre Suite. This involved knocking through and supporting two of the enormous stone cross walls, which would have been no small task. A new flat-roofed kitchen block was also built at the front of the building and finished in a red sandstone veneer, but it still looked squat and ugly compared to the rest of the building. Also around this time, the original exterior fire escape staircase was removed from the southern gable end of the building to allow the widening of the adjacent road bridge, and this was replaced with an internal stairway as part of the kitchen block. At this time, the hotel's owner was the famous Cypriot businessman Rio Stakis, who owned a large chain of hotels and restaurants in Scotland, and he was keen to invest in them to grow his business. Throughout the 1970s and 80s, the Station Hotel was a popular venue for live music, dance, and disco events, with the famous Scottish comedian and musician Billy Connolly reportedly making several appearances at the folk nights. The hotel's function rooms and large bedroom capacity also made it an excellent venue for wedding receptions, with many local couples celebrating their marriages there. By the 1990s, the hotel was also a popular stop for coach tours, and its owners at the time, Friendly Hotels, had also diversified it further with the construction of a gym and spa in the basement area. Into the 2000s, the hotel was still busy, but it was starting to look quite old-fashioned. This was an attraction for some who appreciated it for its quirkiness and its old world looks, and it also helped that the venues were usually quite cheap to hire, making it a bit of a party central. However, parts of it were looking dated and run down, and it was clearly in much need of an overhaul. In the Christmas week of 2006, the hotel suddenly closed when its operator at the time, the London and Edinburgh Swallow Group, collapsed into administration. It was then reopened by Crerar Management, who continued to operate it under the Swallow brand for a few more years before the hotel was put up for sale in 2010. It was bought by a Malaysian property developer who initially ran the hotel in much the same way as it had been before. However, signs of underlying problems continued to show, with the top floor being closed off due to issues with rainwater ingress through the slate roof. The hotel's full-time drinks licence was allowed to lapse, which in Scottish hospitality is a recipe for disaster, and it operated instead on a bring-your-own-bottle and occasional events licence basis. Over the next couple of years, there were stories of unpaid suppliers, lapsed electrical and gas safety certificates, a boiler breakdown that left guests with no hot water during a busy horse race weekend, and the lift being condemned by the fire safety officer. On top of this, the hotel was now receiving many poor reviews from disgruntled guests, who described it as being shabby and dysfunctional, with dated rooms and a smell of damp. Customers inevitably drifted away, and eventually the situation came to a head in June 2013 when the hotel closed down completely. At the time, it was reported that the owner planned to refurbish the building and convert a large portion of it into student flats, which would have made a lot of sense, with the new University of the West of Scotland campus opening nearby and a general lack of affordable student housing in the town at the time. However, South Ayrshire Council has since pointed out that no formal plans were ever submitted for conversion to flats, and indeed nothing appeared to happen, with the hotel setting closed up while life went on around it. Lack of maintenance had resulted in the roof falling into a very poor condition, with loose slates and ironwork, and also greenery growing from parts of it, earning the hotel the nickname the Hanging Gardens of Ayr. Network Rail had to intervene and put up netting to reduce the risk to railway passengers using the platforms below. In late 2015, it looked like there was some movement at last, with local media reporting that the hotel may reopen, and sure enough, scaffolding soon was erected at the front of the building, and repair works were carried out on the stonework. However, nothing appeared to be done at the rear side facing the railway platforms, which was in far worse condition than the front. This may have been due to access problems, with the live railway lines and overhead high-voltage cables being situated close to the back wall, making it extremely challenging to carry out any repair work safely. There were serious concerns by this point about the deterioration of the hotel, and wooden crash decks and hoarding were placed around the walls by the railway platforms to protect the public from falling debris. More time passed, and then in 2018, a large chunk of masonry fell into the car park, and a dangerous buildings notice was issued against the hotel, with the local council demanding that the owner remedy the situation urgently. However, the owner did not respond, and the council was forced to take action themselves, drawing on public funds to carry out a condition assessment and mitigate the danger to the public. Following removal of the greenery and inspection of the roof and walls, it was found that the condition of the building fabric was in far worse condition than feared, and a safety exclusion zone was placed around the hotel. This resulted in Ayr Station being closed completely in August 2018, causing massive disruption at the time, with services south of Ayr being cancelled. Drastic action was required, and this took the form of an enormous scaffold structure that was erected around the south wing of the hotel, which was in the poorest condition, and it was covered in white plastic sheeting. The idea was to make this part of the hotel wind and watertight and contain any more debris that did fall off. The north wing of the hotel was found to be in a much better state of repair, and this was covered in lightweight protective netting. The station reopened in November, but the station facilities and the ground floor of the north wing were still closed off to the public, with station operations instead being run from porta cabins. At the time, it was assumed that the situation would only be temporary, with further action being taken to get the owner to step up and repair the hotel. An extensive building survey was undertaken in 2019, with results being published in a document of more than 700 pages. It was a damning report detailing a large number of problems such as cracked masonry, serious roof damage, water ingress, and rot to the timberwork. It was estimated that the cost of returning the building back to a safe and usable condition would be around £10 million, and this was without factoring in any modernisation work that would have to be done to bring it up to modern standards. However, with the owner unresponsive and no other parties willing to foot the bill, the hotel sat in limbo, with the monthly rental costs of the scaffolding encapsulation continuing to accumulate. This created a great deal of anger about the situation at the time, with the public becoming annoyed with the continuing disruption in and around the railway station and the perceived lack of action to any resolution. Most of the complaints were directed at the local council, who were quick to point out that the building was privately owned and that they had taken action within their capacity to protect public safety. However, some work was going on in the background, with an engineering consultancy carrying out a feasibility study for the council into potential future uses for the hotel building. This produced a list of options, including conversion to residential apartments, retail units, offices, student residences, or a mixture of these. A limitation, though, was how narrow the building was, and this, combined with the need to add more internal staircases and lifts to meet modern safety regulations, limited the amount of useful floor space. Then there were the more radical options, which involved partial or full demolition. The premise for these was the council's long-term vision of turning the station into a public transport hub, with the town's bus station being relocated to meet with the railway station. And from the report, it looked like the best way of doing this was by demolishing some or all of the building and starting again fresh. This created upset with local and national heritage groups, who were keen to see the original building saved and restored, but the issue, as always, was that no one was willing to pay for this to happen. Meanwhile, the hotel's elusive owner remained silent, and the building continued to crumble. It was around this time that groups of urban explorers started to find their way inside the hotel and publish pictures and videos of the interior online. This came as a revelation to many locals who had not seen what was inside for many years and were shocked and saddened by how bad some parts had become. The hotel's familiar venues, such as the Kintyre Suite on the ground floor, lay in a decrepit state thanks to years of relentless water damage following the closure. Once a hub of the local social scene, it now lay silent and decaying. Moving along the ground floor corridor, there lay what was the station bar, which was in an even worse state. One video from 2020 showed water pouring through this room, apparently from a burst pipe somewhere up in the roof space. The 2019 survey report mentioned that water was running through the building, yet it seems that it took over a year for this to be turned off. Beyond the bar lay storage areas, including a large room at the base of the tower. This was once a cafe bar called the Whistle Stop, which could be accessed from the station concourse. It closed sometime in the 1980s, but the original door still survived, yet it was panelled over and invisible from the station side. From the lobby, a grand staircase wound its way up to the upper floors. In the middle of the stairway lay an ancient lift running in a metal caged shaft, complete with manual doors. A hydraulic hoist is mentioned in the newspaper articles from 1886, but this would have undoubtedly have been replaced and modernised over time. Even so, it would have still been very antiquated in the latter days of the hotel, and was reportedly condemned some time before the complete closure in 2013. Upstairs on the first floor, some of the grandest original features of the hotel could be seen. Here the ceilings were still at their full height, revealing the original ornate cornicing and other plaster decorations that adorned them. The archways to either side of the landing had been filled in at some point, with swing doors added, probably to meet more stringent fire regulations as the decades progressed. Turning right on the landing, one of the most iconic features of the hotel could be seen, the cocktail lounge. This was a large and commodious room where guests would have been able to sit and relax and enjoy drinks whilst watching the world go by through the tall windows. The distinctive red and white patterned walls were overhung by another ornate ceiling, which still appeared to be in remarkably good condition. At the rear of the room lay a little hut-style bar, a later addition, which was styled so that it could be locked up outside of licensed hours, whilst the lounge could still be used by guests. Beyond the cocktail bar was a long corridor leading to the dining rooms. This corridor is mentioned in the 1886 articles as having a particularly pleasing effect, and it is clear to see why. Yet this now appeared to be very badly damaged, since it lay along the eastern wall of the hotel, where the roof was in the worst condition, allowing water to run down through the upper floor bedrooms and into this section. The next room off the corridor was the Ayr Suite, which functioned as a dining room and events venue. This was a particularly grand space, with imitation pillars surrounding the walls and a large central window with French doors leading onto a small external balcony. The tables and chairs were still arranged around the room, as if they were waiting for the next party of guests to arrive. Heading back out onto the corridor and turning right, it led to the hotel's main restaurant. This was a plainer room, but still with a grand ceiling, and it would have been where guests and visitors dined day to day. A strange corridor had been constructed around the side of this room, leading to the kitchen block. This was inside the wing at the front of the building, which was added during a major remodeling in the late 1960s, and this contained two kitchens serving both the first and ground floor dining rooms and also the entire suite. All of the original equipment remained in place, along with a goods lift and dumb waiter system, allowing food to be passed easily between both levels. Moving back along to the first floor landing and through the next set of doors, a dark corridor snaked its way through the centre of the building, eventually leading to the Carrack Room, which was located inside the central tower at the front of the hotel. This was originally a lounge for guests, but in the latter days of the hotel's operation, it was used for conferences and other small events. The wood panelling was original, featuring copperplate images of Roman soldiers around a central marble fireplace. In the corner of the room there was a tall window looking out towards Burns Statue Square, and these windows were very reminiscent of those that were on the earlier St Enoch Hotel in Glasgow. The Carrack Room didn't appear to be quite as badly damaged by water as some of the other parts of the hotel, but a section of the plaster ceiling had fallen to the floor and broken into pieces. Beyond this room lay a long corridor running into the north wing containing some of the bedrooms, which were all very similar. Moving upstairs one level, the entire second floor was dedicated to more bedrooms, which all had variations of the same general theme. One room stood out though, and this was the so-called presidential suite, which was located in the central tower above the Carrack Room. Future American President Woodrow Wilson stayed in the hotel during a cycling trip to Scotland in 1899, so perhaps this is how the room got its name. Outside this room there was a staircase connecting the second floor of the south wing to both the second and third floors of the north wing. This slightly faulty tower-style arrangement was because the north wing had lower floor levels than the south, so this meant that the third floor of the north wing could only be reached on the second floor of the south. Looking up at the ceiling in the corridor behind the central tower, it was clear to see that the rot had truly set into the floor joists of the top floor, and this was the result of years of water running into this section through both the roof and also from the leaking water tank. On the third floor, the central corridor that ran the full length of the south wing looked okay, but the rooms to either side told a different story. The outer wall of these was formed by the lower part of the mansard roof, and this had deteriorated to the point where the walls had started to decay and collapse, opening the rooms to the outside elements. Pigeons had infested this floor and scattered their mess everywhere. Apparently, this part of the hotel was closed off while it was still operating, suggesting that the condition of the roof had made it unfit for guests to stay in. Moving all the way back downstairs, there was one more floor, the basement. This could be reached from a steep staircase that was beside the entrance to the station bar, and this led to a series of rooms which from the 1990s onwards had been used as a leisure suite, complete with gym, sauna, steam room, and jacuzzi. After closure, this fell into particularly disgusting condition, with overflowing drains causing much of the basement to be flooded with water. In another section of the basement lay the boiler room, which contained three boilers that could be run on both gas and central heating oil from a large tank also located in the basement. The remains of two large hot water calorifiers sat nearby, although these had at some point been relieved of much of their copper. Unfortunately, this was just one indication that the large empty hotel covered in scaffolding had become attractive to metal thieves, and there was also a fair amount of general vandalism around the building, with furniture thrown around and windows smashed. Much of this problem was hidden from the outside world by the scaffold and plastic shroud, although it was well known and reported in the media that the derelict hotel was attracting unwanted attention. Sadly, it was only a matter of time before the situation would escalate. Mid-afternoon on Sunday the 28th of May 2023, smoke was seen coming from beneath the plastic covers at the rear of the south wing of the hotel. The railway station was quickly evacuated, and the fire brigade soon arrived from their station nearby. They had to break through the protective wooden hoarding to gain access to the building, and were seen entering wearing breathing apparatus to tackle the fire. It was soon extinguished, and a larger disaster was avoided. By mid-evening, the trains had resumed running on the line. The following day, it was reported that 2 teenagers had been arrested and charged in connection with the fire. The following month, the local news reported that a conservation building surveyor had been given access to the hotel to carry out their own assessment, and another report of the building's condition was being drawn up. This was published on the 14th of September, which was the day before a special council meeting was to be held to discuss demolishing the south wing of the hotel. This report painted a more optimistic picture of the building's condition and its potential for refurbishment and reuse. An estimate of £9.2 million was stated for the building's repair, which was lower than previous estimates and not much more than the expected cost of the demolition work. This report was regarded by some at the time as a game changer, but again the issue of who would pay for any refurbishment remained the elephant in the room. Meanwhile, it looked as though the council would plough on ahead with the plan to partially demolish the hotel to make way for a transport hub. Once again, the station hotel was on fire, and this time it was much more serious. The alarm was raised at 5:37 p.m. on Monday the 25th of September 2023, which happened to be a school holiday. Smoke had been seen pouring from the roof of the hotel, starting from just behind the central clock tower, and shortly afterwards the roof of the tower itself was ablaze, creating a dramatic scene for the crowd of onlookers gathering nearby. Initial attempts by the fire brigade to quell the fire seemed to have little effect, with the water jets from the ground unable to reach the section of the building which was burning. Ironically, Ayr Fire Station had just lost its aerial ladder a few weeks previously due to cutbacks. Even when an aerial ladder eventually arrived from Kilmarnock, the white scaffold tent deflected much of the water, allowing the fire to continue burning underneath. By mid-evening, the fire had spread through the full length of the south wing, and the roof and interiors of the hotel could be heard collapsing inside, sending showers of sparks into the air and burning debris into the lower floors of the building. A large cordon was set up by the police to keep the public away, but the spectacle continued to attract onlookers who had come to see the event that everybody in the town had expected to happen at some point. Some in the car park of the nearby supermarket had even brought folding chairs and flasks along to the event to spectate. All trains on the line were, of course, cancelled, which had a knock-on effect on passengers who were left stranded up and down the lines. By late evening, many of the onlookers had drifted away, whilst the firefighters continued to battle the blaze late on into the night. The next morning, there was still smoke and steam rising from the building, but the fire had been brought under control. The hotel was a scene of complete devastation, but much of this was still obscured by the white scaffolding cover, which had survived amazingly well given the circumstances. Fire crews continued to tackle parts of the building that were still burning, which included the roof of about half of the north wing. By Thursday the 28th, the fire had been extinguished, and the people of Ayr were left to look upon the wreck that the building had become. Reports had already emerged that 3 unnamed teenagers had been arrested and charged with willful fire raising. The future of the hotel now looked certain, with demolition machinery quietly arriving at the site that weekend. The council's building standards team were soon on the scene to secure the area and carry out an assessment of the condition of the hotel. Over the following weeks, a mixture of high-reach access platforms and drones were used to photograph the inside of the building, which was deemed too unsafe for anyone to enter. Soon, it was confirmed that the south wing had been completely gutted by the blaze, with one of the internal cross walls near the south end having collapsed. What was dubbed the safety works soon began, with demolition crews moving in and levelling the modern kitchen wing before starting on the southernmost end of the building. This sparked outrage with heritage groups who demanded that another solution be found, but the demolition continued to grind on. With the railway and adjacent road bridge still being closed, an enormous amount of disruption was being caused, and the local people and nearby businesses were suffering as a result. The demolition work was a painstaking process, with crews having to mostly work by hand to dismantle all the stone to reduce the danger of any sudden collapses damaging the road and the railway. The original Glasgow and South Western Railway Company stone crest was removed from the front of the building and taken away for safe storage, so at least a small part of its heritage was saved. By the Christmas holidays, enough of the building had been taken down to allow the road bridge to reopen to traffic. Also by this point, ScotRail had introduced a diesel shuttle train running from the far end of Platform 4, which was at a safe distance from the building, and this allowed passengers to travel to Prestwick and connect with trains up to Glasgow. However, no trains were running south of the station, and these services were still running on replacement buses. It would be several more months before normal operation would be restored. The demolition work on the south wing continued into the new year, and by late March most of the south wing was gone. It had been hoped by some groups that the north wing and tower would survive, but it was found that some of the structure, particularly a timber beam which supported the top floor of the tower, had been damaged in the fire. By late April, work had started on demolishing the tower, revealing sections of the building such as the carrick room, which had escaped the fire. Soon the machinery moved on to the north wing, bringing any section with a fire-damaged roof down to ground level, including the ground floor, which had housed the railway station ticket office and its facilities. Bedrooms were revealed that still had their furniture in place, with pictures hanging on the walls. Eventually the work stopped at a point where the roof was not fire damaged, as it could not have legally been demolished under public safety grounds. This section was cleared of loose debris, with the chimneys being cropped down to a lower level, and then it was boarded up and the roof was covered up with a new protective sheet. And this is how it still remains to this day, 1 year on from the second fire. What the future holds for the remaining section of the hotel is still uncertain, with it still being property of the absentee owner. However, the wide expectation is that this will eventually be brought into public ownership and also demolished, clearing the way for construction of a new transport hub. The local authorities continue to pursue the owner for millions of pounds in costs incurred for all the safety work carried out over the years, including the scaffolding hire and also the demolition. It was a sad end for the station hotel, with many people holding memories of happier days within its walls. However, with the world having completely changed since its glory days, perhaps this is an opportunity for the town to make the most of the space left behind by it, and build something new to benefit future generations.